Well, welcome to the Unstoppable Freedom Podcast. I'm Jimmy Page. Well, it's no secret that our educational system has come under incredible scrutiny following the COVID lockdowns because parents like us got a front row seat to what was really going on in their kids' classrooms. Most parents were shocked at what they saw. But the most frequently asked question that we get is this. Well, now that we know, what can we do about it? Well, if that's you, if you've got kids or you've got grandkids in school or you have neighbors who need to know, today we have an incredible guest who's on the front lines of this issue, and she's going to empower you to take action. Jill Simonian is our guest, and she's the Director of Outreach for PragerU Resources for Educators and Parents, and she's also the Director for PragerU Kids. Jill, welcome to the show.
Hi, Jimmy. It's so good to talk to you, finally.
Let's go. We made it happen. I'm so excited. I know that you're really busy because our educational system is probably the most important thing that we're facing right now. We got a lot of challenges, but it's a big one, isn't it?
Yeah, it is a big one. And, it's interesting because my sister is a public school teacher, fabulous public school teacher in
Yes.
California. My
Mm.
mom was a teacher. My grandmother was a teacher. I have had my whole life this long time affection and
Yes.
respect and reverence for, what teachers do and the uphill battle that educators are always faced with. But I've
Yes.
really found myself in this difficult scenario now where I have to reconcile that our education system, and I've seen this firsthand as a mom, our education
Yes.
system is not what it was 30 years ago, 40 years ago. We've
Yes.
been compromised, we've been hijacked, and our kids are frankly being abused, and it's tough.
Yes. Well, it's interesting you say that. My dad was a superintendent of schools in upstate New York. My sister, one of the best teachers I know, teaches in Fairfax County, Virginia, which is in some ways the epicenter of a lot of the garbage that's happening, if
It
you
is,
will.
yeah.
So I feel the same way. And I feel this conflict because on the one hand, I'm recommending, hey, we need a nationwide walkout. I mean, this
Right.
is such a big mess and disaster. I'm like, let's pull everybody out and start over. But on the other hand, we've got a lot of great teachers in the system that need support, right?
Mm-hmm. No, exactly. And that's one thing that we have learned. Uh, the unions, we do know that the unions have, and forgive me for just continuing to use the word
Yeah.
hijacked, but
Yeah.
it's the only reasonable term that I can use that people understand. The unions have, in fact, hijacked and politicized our education system, but especially through my work now with PragerU and our parent and educator group that we have, PREP,
Yes.
PragerU
Yeah.
Resources for Educators and Parents, that really coincides with our PragerU Kids content. We have found thousands and thousands of teachers across the country who really are devastated about
Yeah.
how political messaging has made its way into curriculum, into daily lessons inside the classroom. We have teachers who we talk to every single day through our discussion groups and through emails that we get through work saying, I am single-handedly trying to reject these
Yes.
radicalized directives that I am getting from my administrators to teach children about gender fluidity, to teach children history through a CRT lens. We know that there are
Yes.
good teachers out there. So it's tough
Yeah.
because we want to speak up and speak truth and push back against the lies that are being fed to our kids. But we do want to support the teachers and know that we're not trying to villainize the teachers because we know there's good ones
Yeah.
out there.
That's right. I think the hardest thing that we've realized in this fight is the fear and intimidation that teachers feel in these systems, right? I live in Colorado. Our educational system is at the forefront of this indoctrination. We don't call it education anymore. There's very little education going on actually in northern Colorado. But we do see these teachers who are sending these anonymous emails to us and others that are telling us what's really happening. They're in fear for losing their job. They get disciplined. In Colorado, you've seen this because you work nationwide. Teachers are sent for re-education for refusing to use preferred pronouns that don't match biological gender. I mean, you're seeing that, right?
Yes, yes. And we see news headlines frequently about this exact thing. And forgive me because I can't I can't. It's like, when you see hundreds of them a day, they all sort of run into each other. But a few weeks ago, I did read an article about how teachers were being reprimanded, and I believe there was some sort of there may or may not have been a lawsuit involved,
Mm.
saying that a middle schooler or a
Yeah.
group of middle schoolers were going to be charged because they failed to use the preferred pronoun of a classmate. And
Yeah.
it's really, I mean, you think that this is hyperbole, and you think that this is made up, and everyone from the other side of the aisle will say that's misinformation. They say the word
Yeah.
misinformation. It's really
Yeah.
not. Even, I'm based in Southern California, and my
Mm.
kids
Oh,
were
wow.
in, yeah, my
First of all,
kids were in,
that's a problem, right? I mean, you're
it
on the
is
front
a
lines for
problem. It
real.
is a problem. I've since pulled my children out of our once beloved public school and put them in a private classical education alternative. But in
Mm.
Oakland, at an Oakland high school, several months ago, there was a huge article about how a transition closet was being touted at this one Oakland high school so that children could get dropped off at school and hide their preferred pronouns and gender identity from their parents. And that to me
Amazing.
is as far as you can get from a school parent partnership, which is
Yes.
what truly educates children in the best way.
Yes, and we have seen the same things here in Colorado, where these secret conversations. And by the way, it's not just in the blue states, right? We tend to think, oh, if you're in a red state, your educational system is going to be fine. But we've discovered the same thing. Secret conversations are being had between an adult and a minor, our kids, that are kept from parents. They're encouraging them to do so, and it's happening everywhere. And you mentioned it because of the unions, right? The union influence is nationwide. It doesn't really matter whether you're in a red community or a blue community, if you will, not to get political. It really matters what the unions are telling your teachers your curriculum is. Isn't that the way it works?
I'm trying to continue my education about how deep the roots of the teacher unions go. But
Yeah.
yeah, in a nutshell, that is what it is. And it's funny because even in most of California, it's no secret that the California Teachers Association pretty much runs the state of California when it comes to
Yes.
anything education related. But it's interesting because in California specifically, I have researched and learned about certain pockets around the state where school districts do not have unionized teachers. And those,
Fantastic.
ironically, are the school districts that have the best parent and teacher partnerships, that have
Mm,
the highest reading scores and mathematic abilities for their students. Those really are the higher performing schools, the districts that do not have extreme influence from the
yes.
unions.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's one of those situations where we always say follow the money. Well, it's actually true. Follow the money. Who's paying? Who's pulling the strings? I think for me, the reason this became an issue for me as a dad, I've got 4 kids. They're all grown now. They're all college or graduated, which is amazing. But I had a front row seat during the COVID lockdowns when they shut down the schools. It was the greatest gift in the world from the COVID pandemic, or however you feel
Mhm.
about that. But it was the greatest gift because I got to watch what was actually happening in my daughter's classroom, and I was absolutely appalled. I started going to board meetings myself, advocating for her, advocating for other people's kids. Let's talk about the issues just real quick. We've said it, and you've said it a number of times. It's really not about education anymore. It's more about indoctrination. They're the big topics, and you've addressed them in social media and in your platform: CRT, DEI, SEL, whatever name you want to put on the critical race theory piece, the social activism. Our schools, in many ways, are robbing our kids of innocence through this hypersexualization that's going on and this anti American sentiment, right? Those are the biggies. How are we dealing with those things? Let's take those one at a time. Why is this critical race theory so tough and undermining our culture in America?
Well, the foundation of it is to divide people based on the color of their skin, which
Mm.
is segregation, first of all.
Right.
I thought, isn't segregation wrong? I thought we
Didn't we win that
rightfully
one?
did away
Didn't we
with
already win
all
that?
of that decades ago. And, I apologize for laughing because this is not funny at all. And I don't want to
Yeah.
give your listeners and viewers any kind of impression that I take this lightly or I think it's a
Oh,
joke.
yeah.
I really don't. I've literally gotten to the point where I don't know what else to do anymore because the
Yeah.
lies being forced onto our children to
Yes.
see each other. I mean, we're talking about 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds, little kids, to try and aim to teach them to see each other by skin color first and how different they all are goes against everything that is true and right and good.
Yes.
From God.
Yeah.
I
Yes.
am gonna
Oh, yeah.
say that. No
Oh,
matter
yeah.
what religion you
Yes.
believe or don't believe or study or don't study, America was founded on Judeo-Christian values. It is
Yes.
because of the rules of Judeo-Christian values that we are given the gift of freedom, and
Yeah.
that's what our country was founded upon. Those
Yes.
gifts of freedom, so that people can choose to believe or not believe any religion they choose. So,
Yeah.
that aside, that the teaching the children to recognize each other by differences first is so tragic and scary and terrifying because that is
Yes.
going to disintegrate the fabric of our communities and our country,
Yes.
and that's what it's going to be. And even with, a
Yeah.
lot of people with the I do sort of want to talk about the SEL, the social emotional
Yes.
learning, which you just mentioned.
Mm.
In theory, when it first started decades ago, and I have done some research into this, when it first started decades ago, it was meant in education systems to sort of fill the gaps of the kids who might not have an ideal family life at home to support
Right.
them, so that when they walk into the classroom, they feel mentally and physically sound to be ready to learn. But what
Mhm.
SEL has transformed into, by way of the umbrella organization that leads it
Mm.
into our schools, CASEL, CASEL.org. You can look it up. It's starting to give students surveys, young students ages 8, 9, as young as that, surveys about assess how you feel about how different you are from your classmates. How do you feel about how, if that person looks different, if that person did better on a test than you, if you did better on a test? It asks students as young as 8 years old, do you identify as non-binary? This social emotional learning, which started as a okay, positive thing, I can
Yeah.
meet you halfway with that. It's now morphed into something that really is rooted in critical race theory and social
Yes.
justice and these radicalized causes. And it is in every single classroom across America, whether we want to believe it or not.
That is, I want to sit on that point for a second because every school district today, now they've got the narratives going that, oh, we don't have a class on CRT. Well, that's exactly right. No one in their right mind would have a class on CRT. So what they've done is they've broken it down and put it into their curriculum in every single classroom. So, for me, it's interesting because the whole concept of CRT, dividing us by race, is based upon the idea of oppressors and oppressed, that some people are victims. One of the things I love about you is you go straight after this idea that you will not allow your kids to be victims. Tell us about that.
Correct. And this is an ongoing theme that we do include in all of our PragerU Kids videos that are up on
Mm.
our website. Free videos, kindergarten through 12th grade, but we constantly want to teach children our American values, and one of those values is the gift of being an individual, and the
Yes.
gift of being able to work hard and have
Mm.
responsibility for yourself, and to know that you, whoever you are, whatever you look like, wherever you come from,
Mm.
we are equal under the law here in the
Yeah.
United States of America. We are equal under God. And and
Yes.
and something that I just continue to tell my kids, and it's funny because my daughters are now in the upper elementary school age. So they're not little, but they're not teenagers yet, and they're in
Uh-huh.
this wonderful age where they understand what it means to think critically and to push back against people or even authority figures now that are trying to get you to feel a certain way. And I
Yes.
constantly tell them, you are responsible for yourself. If someone is mean to you, if someone tells you that you should feel one way or the other, you need to stop and say, I am an individual. No matter
Yes.
what happened or didn't happen to me in my life, I am not a victim. I'm responsible for myself. And it's funny because I
Yeah.
talked about, I'm guessing you saw it on my social media
I
recently.
did. I
I
loved
talked
it.
about this concept of the buddy bench. Do you,
I had never heard of the buddy bench.
let
I
me
was educated.
explain. Maybe it's this to me, the buddy bench is the epitome of teaching children to take on a victimized mindset at school. And maybe it's
Mm,
just a California thing, but I'm going to tell you, several years
mm,
ago at my girls' former elementary school, which I've since pulled them
mm,
out of for reasons that we
mm.
all know and love now that's happening in our education system, there was a buddy bench. And what this is a bench on the playground. And my girls would come home and say, yeah, so and so was on the buddy bench. And I said, what is this buddy bench? Well, teachers and principals and administrators and skilled staff, anyone, any adult at the school used to tell the children, if you go to recess and you can't decide what to play, or you can't find your friend, or you don't know what to do, just sit on the buddy bench and wait for someone to come and invite you to play. And my head nearly flew off of my body because to me, no. I told my girls, I said, if I ever find out that you sat on that buddy bench, you're going to be in big trouble when you come home, because that is
You're a good
the
mom.
foundation of a victim mindset. No, you do not sit
Yes.
on a bench and wait for someone to do something for you. You get up,
Yes.
you put yourself out there. Sure, you may get hurt. Sure, you might feel insecure, but guess what? That's part of growing, and that's part of becoming a
Yes.
responsible adult.
No question. I love that because I won't accept the victim mindset either. The victim mindset puts power into someone else's hands. They don't have power over my emotions. They don't have power over the way I think. They don't have power over what I do. No one does. And we've all been made in the image of God. It's one of the beautiful things about being a person of faith, having deep faith, deep Christian faith, is the fact that you believe that every single human being has value because they're made in the image of God. They've got incredible purpose and potential and strength. And, for us, it's about being responsible and capable. Be responsible for yourself. Take advantage of the opportunities that you have. And I've always told my kids, be willing to stand alone. Oftentimes, it is the smartest thing you can do is not to go along with what everyone else is doing. And I think that's the real threat that I see is that we are not teaching kids to be critical thinkers anymore or to have self-confidence. Instead, we're telling them that they're going to go along with whatever we're telling them in the classroom. And
It's
and that's
true.
a big concern.
It's true. And you are right on with that. And I couldn't agree more, because being able, I mean, it's hard as a kid. You want to go along with the crowd. I remember
Yeah,
all too
I
well. And
do.
we still
Oh
feel
yeah.
that way many times as adults. It's
Yeah.
very
Yeah.
scary to speak on your own.
Yeah.
However, raising children to not have that sense of right or wrong, and I have the freedom to say
Yes.
something if it's wrong, that is what will crumble our country.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because in classrooms, what I've noticed, even with my own daughters personally, which I am trying to, I don't want to say undo, but I'm trying to hone it a little bit, they have been taught by educators in their previous school that if you speak up and say something, thanks to critical thinking, you're being, quote, unkind. And that's very
Wow.
dangerous. Of course, we want children to be kind. I believe in kindness. Everyone deserves dignity and respect and kindness. However, speaking up for yourself, communicating your thoughts, expressing what you believe is right, even if it's against the grain, that's not unkind. But our children
That's
are
right.
being taught to perceive that as being unkind, which is,
It's
that's
ridiculous.
terrifying as well.
It is, because it leads to one of the other big topics that's happening in school, this whole gender fluidity, this whole gender identity issue. That, if a child feels that they are not empowered, I think anytime you don't empower a kid to stand up for themselves or speak their mind, regardless of whether you like what they say, anytime you don't empower that child, they are at risk of being taken advantage of by adults. And this whole idea of transitioning, gender fluidity, if an adult in the school system makes a suggestion to a child and the child doesn't feel strong enough to be able to voice their opinions, that could lead them down a road that really puts them in a compromising situation, couldn't it?
It's true. Yes, absolutely. And there used to be boundaries where
Boy.
an adult was not permitted to talk with a child about certain topics
Right.
without their parent being present or without parental consent. And our schools have
That's right.
lost that. I mean, across the country,
Yes.
we saw for the month of June, we saw American flags being replaced with pride flags. Now, I will reiterate, everyone deserves to live life as they wish as an adult. You can
Yes.
celebrate anything you want as long as it doesn't directly
Yes.
harm someone else. But when you are putting that into schools, into an age inappropriate situation without a
Yes.
parent present, that is frankly harassment and child abuse.
Yes.
And it
Yes.
is a breach of parental rights.
Yes. I mean, think about this for a second, right? If your child was over at your friend's house, your neighbor's house, playing with their friends, and a parent in that home had these conversations with your daughter, for example, your 7-year-old, it it might come to blows. Like, I mean, I could see that being a real conflict between what if I found out about that as a parent, that I sent my child to this home, a neighbor, and they had these inappropriate adult to child conversations. That would be a real problem. My daughter probably wouldn't be playing at that house again.
Right.
And yet, if that happened from someone who was clergy or someone in the ministry, it would be a crime to have those conversations and they would be prosecuted. And yet, we send our kids off to school and they're having these conversations and no one is being held accountable for it. I think the hardest thing for me to really get my head around is that our schools no longer support our most deeply held values as families. Have you seen that? You've seen it because you pulled your kids out.
I have. And before my husband and I made the tough call to change our girls' education,
Mm.
but the way we educate our kids, I was going to school board meetings all the time. And one of the things that kept coming up was that word diversity, equity, and inclusion. Diversity, inclusion, inclusion,
Yes.
inclusion, inclusion. And at one school board meeting, I stood up and it was right before the holidays. And I
Mm.
said, you talk about diversity and inclusion, but you do not walk the walk with diversity and inclusion, school board
Mm.
members and school officials, because if you did, my family would be allowed to say Merry Christmas on campus at their school. There would be a Merry Christmas sign next to the
Yes.
sign that said Happy Holidays. They had a Happy
Yes.
Hanukkah sign, which rightfully so, you should have
Oh.
Happy Hanukkah signs, but you could also have Merry Christmas. And they all looked at
Mm.
me, and it's like these words that they throw out, they do
Yes.
it to make you feel, again, unkind
Yep.
because you're not being inclusive enough, but they don't want to include us. And, it's interesting. I mentioned our PragerU Kids shows, and one
Mm.
of the recent episodes we did, our storytime episode, Otto's Tales, specifically for our kindergarten, first and second graders, is we did an episode called Noah and the Rainbow. Well, obviously, it's
Mm.
based on Noah's Ark from the Bible. And we talked about the meaning of the rainbow through the Bible and what the original meaning of the rainbow is.
Mm.
Because, hello,
Yes.
inclusion, inclusion,
Right. Right.
So
Yeah. It seems like this is pretty much common sense. I think the hardest part for us to realize is that we are sending. I can't imagine sending my kid knowingly into an environment where that environment is going to put a full out assault on my deepest held values, on our American ideology, on our roots of faith, and then have to undo that over and over again. We've seen a resurgence in homeschooling. We've seen a resurgence in charter schools and private schools. We've seen some states open up school choice where the money follows the kid, which I think is a brilliant idea. Let's give our listeners some hope and optimism. You used a word, which I think is a great word, especially in the days of vaccines, right? You said, let's inoculate our kids against the indoctrination. I love it. I'm like, man, it's a vaccine. It's an educational vaccine. I love this.
I
Can we do it?
wish
Come on.
I wish I could take credit for that phrase. I got to give credit where it belongs. PragerU's CEO is a mother of 3 children, and her name is Marissa Streit, and she's
She's amazing.
fabulous and incredible and amazing, all the things, smart, everything. And she, early on, when we first started developing PragerU Kids, in a meeting, she said, this is the way we can inoculate our kids. And it was right at the heat of all of the vaccine
Yes.
launches, everything. And
Yes.
we were like, oh my goodness, inoculate. But it's
Perfect.
appropriate. And the way that we can do that, obviously, is through the home. And
Yes.
all of our PragerU Kids shows are, like I said, they're free on the website,
Yes.
pragerukids.com. We have digital magazines, we have books for sale, but what we're creating are resources and tools for parents to use to bridge that gap between our
Yes.
kids. We read them books. We can do the crossword puzzles on the educational magazines. We can watch the
Mm.
videos instead of plopping the kids in front of Cartoon Network that
Yes.
has age inappropriate themes in many of its
Yes.
programming. Plop them in front of PragerU Kids, inoculate them a little bit, let them get some
Yes.
truth, let them get some freedom, let them get some
Yes.
responsibility driven messages. That way, when they see the garbage fed to them through the unions or through
Yes.
radical agenda, curriculum, anything like that, they can then reconcile it and say, well, that doesn't make sense because it doesn't go with
Yeah.
how our country was founded or what we believe in our home or what mom and dad talked to me about, those types of things.
Yes. So I love PragerU. I love PragerU Kid. I love all of the resources that you're producing. If I had little kids today, they'd be in front of that all day. We'd be talking about it at dinner table. I mean, it's that good. I remember with our kids, we used to watch a program called Liberty Kids. And oh my gosh, it was just fabulous teaching American history through cartoons, reinforcing our values. That's PragerU Kids. That's PragerU. It's what you're doing. So I'm super thankful for the resources that you all are producing. It's just massively important.
Thank you. It's a lot of fun. I'm not going to lie. It's crazy because we've really ramped it up a lot and it's a lot of fun, and I think we're coming up on, or we may have even surpassed 200 pieces of content
Gosh,
produced in the last
incredible.
year. So and
Incredible.
here's a full transparency. I myself am learning a lot that I never knew before through the
Yeah.
different
Oh, sure.
topics that we're tackling, because there's a lot there are a lot of holes in my American history
Oh,
education,
yeah.
and I
Yeah.
myself will watch a lot of our videos made for the tween crowd and say, "Oh my goodness, I never knew that, and that is something
Right.
that I should have known."
Well, listen, this is the kind of re-education that we need, right? I mean, we
Right.
talk about re-education. This is a return to the actual truth of our history. And I'm like you. I'm learning so much. I've told people that in this freedom fight, it's like getting a PhD in 6 weeks. You just get absolutely immersed in it. And I think that's what's beautiful about this. One of the challenges that we're facing, right, if we're honest, is the challenge of the breakdown of the family, right? We've got single moms that are working really hard to provide for their families. They're stretched very thin. Isn't this a great resource for the single moms? Isn't this a great way for them to kind of unplug from the indoctrination system and give them the tools and the conversations they can have with their own kids?
It is, and I'm glad you brought that up because families do come in different shapes and sizes and everything. There's no limit to the differences between different family situations. And I mean,
Yes.
this is for single moms, single dads, grandparents, babysitters, older
Yes.
kids, younger kids,
Yes.
siblings, teachers. It really is for everybody. We like to say that our
Mm.
shows are for ages 4 to 104, and that, that's a snappy way of saying it, but it really is true.
Yeah.
It really is true. It's entertaining and educational at the same time, and it's pure and it's innocent, and you're not going to find
Yes.
anything in it that is age inappropriate.
That's right. Well, I think it's a tremendous resource. We're going to send everybody that we can to it because we think that, the expansion of this is what's really going to save our families. It's going to save our culture, and it's going to return education to be doing what it's intended originally to do. Don't you think?
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah,
Yes,
you
we
bet.
certainly hope so. We invite everybody to subscribe. You can get the shows in your email inbox for free a few times a week. That way they're there and you click it and you have a good time.
Jill, I got to tell you, I'm super thankful that you're on the side of producing content, solving the problem, right? Anybody can just be angry about it and yell at what's happening and be frustrated by it. PragerU Kids prep program that you have is actually producing resources that work for families. So thank you so much for that. You've been an awesome guest. We'll have you back again for sure.
Thank you so much. And thank you for everything you're doing. We're
You bet.
all in this together. I know that
Yes,
phrase has a lot of connotation to it, but we really are in this together to save the
we
future
are.
for our country.
We are. Thank you so much. You're a rock star. Appreciate you.
Thank you.